Welcome to Mission Imperfect, the podcast about finding your own path, your own way, and embracing the imperfection of the journey.
We're your hosts, life coaches, former HR professionals, and mums, Kirsty and Kathryn.
We love to discuss the topics that come up time and time again for our coaching clients and which affect us all, from things like acceptance and boundaries to values and well-being and everything in between.
Each episode ends with a question for you and us to reflect on. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab a cuppa and a biscuit and join us in getting lost in finding ourselves. Perfectionism. That's the topic for this week, as you might expect from something called Mission Imperfect. And I think we can guarantee that it won't be perfect. What do you think, Kathryn?
Absolutely, yeah. I think we chose absolutely the right topic to get started with. It gives us a nice way to edge in to our podcasting journey together. But we've both agreed we're not about being perfect, absolutely. And so this just seemed to be absolutely the right topic to get us underway.
And we're setting that up front to excuse all the problems with this podcast.
Yeah, all the technical glitches, all the errors.
This is us
any of the things that might go wrong.
Imperfection.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I mean, perfectionism traditionally has not really been seen as a problem, has it? I mean, I can remember in interview. I mean, I'm old. Let's put that out there. But I am middle-aged, in my 50s, and in interviews when I was in my 20s, perfectionism was the thing that people used when asked, what's your greatest weakness? What's the problem you need to work on? And it's good. Oh, I'm a perfectionist, and I pay too much attention to detail, and it all has to be just right. And you're going, oh, actually, this is really a good thing. And these days, it's not seen in the same way, is it?
Yeah, I agree. It was definitely one of those things that was kind of masquerading as a secret strength. So really what you were kind of trying to indicate was, I don't really have any flaws because my weakness, if you like, is that I like to be too perfect. So you end up in a real odd catch-22 type situation there, don't you? Because we both feel quite comfortable this idea that being perfect is striving for something that just isn't really real. But there's not to say, there's nothing wrong with actually striving to do your best. And that can absolutely be a positive thing. It can be a real driver, a motivator. It means you want to do well. And there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. But doing your best and being perfect are actually different things.
That is a valuable point. Spot on. I mean, it's the point, isn't it? Sometimes the whole sort of embrace for imperfection can be seen as, oh, well, you don't have to give a toss, you can just do it any old way and it doesn't matter. And for me, it's not that at all. Imperfection is recognizing that you can do your best and it may not come up to the standards that you would ideally like it to, or that other people think it should, but that's okay. It's your best.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, you don't get straight A's in everything in life, right? Even if you try your best in school to hit those marks for all of your subjects, it's not really a reflection of real life, is it? We're not, I don't think, cut out to be brilliant at absolutely everything. So it's actually quite a hard message to digest that we should be really good at everything. I personally don't think that prepares you really well for adulthood when you you do have these shortcomings, and if that becomes a shock to you, that's a hard thing to digest, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we can reframe shortcomings as things that other people are better at than you, and it's where your strengths are, other people's aren't, and other people's strengths are where yours aren't. And when you look at it in that way, it can become about a collaborative thing to create the best possible outcome or output from what you're doing. But to expect every individual to be able to do the same thing to the same level all the time, to be perfect, well, we're just creating an army of clones, really, aren't we?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think if you're someone who strives for perfect in everything, you're setting yourself up for something extremely difficult, nigh on impossible. I think we both feel this way. But it's if you've got excessively high standards that you set for yourself, often it's for ourselves, isn't it? Rather than necessarily what we push on to other people. We tend to be overly self-critical to go with that. And that's a very dangerous combination for people to have. So I think actually when someone might declare on their CV the weakness as perfectionism as a kind of flippant thing, my view is actually it's not a flippant comment to really have. I think it can be very damaging for people to have this streak for that combination of those two things, those excessively high standards and being overly self-critical, because it can just sort of stop you in your tracks, can't it?
To think, I mean, it can stop you doing anything. There's a lovely quote from somebody whose name I have promptly forgotten, Julia Cameron, I think it is, but I have forgotten the exact quote, but it's along the lines of perfectionism is what stops you doing anything. And I know I can very much get caught in that loop of, well, I want it to be perfect, and if I can't make it perfect, then why am I doing it? Or I don't know how to make it perfect, so I don't know how to start. And then you get that self-critical thing that you're constantly pushing yourself, constantly striving. I mean, if I were to see perfectionism on somebody's CV as a hiring manager, my first thought would be burnout candidate.
Mm.
That's where we end up burning out, trying to do everything to the highest possible standard all the time is burnout.
Yeah.
But something you said about it, we put it on ourselves rather than pushing it out onto others. I think it's very true, but I'm not sure it necessarily comes from within. I think there's an awful lot of conditioning. I don't know if you'd agree with it, but especially for women around being expected to be the perfect sex object, the perfect partner, the perfect parent, the perfect employee, the perfect working mother. And what you were saying about the criticism that then comes in, the whole, working mother guilt thing, and women beating themselves up for not being good enough. I think there's very much tied up in it, but that does come from outside. We see so many images of perfection.
Yeah.
And I think it can be really damaging.
Definitely. I mean, social media has a lot to answer for, doesn't it? Yeah. I personally love it when you see people who do show more of the reality of what it's like behind the scenes sometimes. I mean, and I joke because we're all guilty of wanting to perhaps show our best side. So for example, if I'm going to put a picture of me on LinkedIn talking about something, I probably won't choose the one where I've got a double chin. So,
just covering mine up now. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we do kind of filter in a way, don't we, to show, I guess, our best side. But equally, I would always accept that I'm not going to look perfect. I might try to pick the picture where I think I look the most like me and the most human, the most alive and awake, and all of those things. But it won't be perfect. But that's okay, because I think if you stop asking that so much of yourself, you're also less likely to be looking for it or judging other people by it as well. I think that's such a liberating way to see things. I think if you're very, very wrapped up in this, like you were saying, this perhaps for women in particular, all these sort of perfect ideals that are out there. Yeah, it's a really difficult thing to try to live up to.
It's tough, isn't it? And it can end up holding you back. I do feel the need to say to listeners, however, that Kathryn does look human.
Oh, thank you.
Very definitely. I can testify to this, just in case you were wondering.
Thanks. Good to know. Yeah.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Maybe one day we'll share the video when we're feeling brave.
Although we do both look a bit alien in this one, in a good way.
Yes, well, space backdrops.
But again, what you said there about showing a picture where you don't have the double chin, you look pretty human, whatever, but it's about looking your best, and you use that word again. It's where we are doing our best, not somebody else's standard of best. And that's what really matters. And I think, that's how the podcast name came about, Mission Imperfect, when we can embrace ourselves as we are, with all our perceived imperfections, without attaining the levels of alleged perfection that society seems to demand of us. That's when we can find a degree of peace and ease within ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. And if you think about it, all people different and are all wonderfully imperfect, aren't they? Because, we've joked that you and I are effectively the same person. Somehow, we've got the same initials. We have a previous similar career, don't we? And we have, we're both coaches, and we met through networking, realized how much we have in common. But of course, we are different. We all have. You think of all the people you know and how different they are in different ways. We have our own little quirks, our little foibles, our likes and dislikes. We share plenty of likes, don't we? We'll probably talk about biscuits at some point, but dislikes, strengths, weaknesses, all of those things. So how can there be a perfect human amongst all this variety and difference? And if you think about, and this is I think a great way to look at it, the person that you love them anyway, and they aren't perfect, are they? You love them anyway because of who they are, nothing to do with any kind of concept of perfectionism. So you kind of realize it's not really a term to get too wrapped up in.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking, I wonder if my husband will listen to this, and does that determine how I respond to that point? No, the people we love aren't perfect, and we love them as they are, not in spite of the imperfections. That's the idea, isn't it? And if it's our differences that bring value, that's what we have to offer. Because humanity wouldn't have made the progress it has if we were all the same. It's from the people who see things that bit differently, who are prepared to ask the awkward questions, or challenge the status quo, or just go, what if we did this? What if that was possible? I wonder, and just be willing to just not go with the flow on what everybody else is thinking and doing and how they're seeing the world. That's what creates progress and evolution, it seems to me.
Yeah.
And especially if we're going to dig ourselves out of the hole we currently seem to be digging ourselves into, I think we probably will need a lot more of that. By that, I mean humanity, not you and me in this podcast. I don't think it's a hole yet.
Yeah. It's interesting what you were saying. You mentioned about schools earlier on, didn't you? About how early on we are sort of in environments that they do shape us, don't they? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting, this idea that we're all put into a system and treated in this very similar way, and to sort of behave in certain ways and to meet certain standards. We're graded against them. We're naturally compared either to like a scale or to our peers, aren't we, in a setting? So you kind of, do you feel that that's where some of this notion of what being perfect comes from?
Absolutely. I hadn't really considered it in the light of that sort of grading approach before, but that's so true. Yeah, are you an A, B, or C? That ages me, doesn't it? That dates me. It's numbers these days, isn't it? But we'll stick with it.
Yeah. No idea about the numbers, I'm afraid. No, yeah, absolutely.
No. My son had to translate them for me when he went through it. But it's, yes, if you do things this way, if you give these answers, you get a good mark. You get the A. But if you put your spin on, if you do it differently, and actually I've found this very much at A level. I was doing sort of arts and humanities subjects, and especially in English literature, putting forward a view around what I thought an author might be saying. If it wasn't the accepted norm, I was being marked down. Even if I'm
smiling, because surprise, surprise, Kirsty, I did English literature.
Of course you
And
did.
you're so right. Of course I did. Of course, because we are secretly the same person. And it's so interesting hearing you say that, because, of course, you have a subject like maths where I didn't used to like maths, but at least I can actually now appreciate, at least with maths, it's this is how you work something out, and the answer is or isn't 6 or whatever it might be. You do follow it. Whereas English, which was always my strength, I suppose, that it was the subject that I enjoyed. Funny enough, it's the subject my daughter says that she enjoys as well now. But it is open to interpretation, isn't it? And it's like, who decides that opinion or interpretation is the most valid or worthy? Or it's a really interesting. I'd love to know what goes through the mind of an examiner when they're marking. How much of it can they really interpret what you've said, or is it literally like, oh, did they mention this sort of criteria and so on? Really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and in interpreting a character, created and written by an author that's long dead, if a student says, I think maybe the author actually, potentially agreed with the views they're putting in this character's mouth, they sound very convincing, and it was out of their time, sort of thing. And I was getting told, no, the writer was a person of their time, and that's that. How do we know that? So as soon as you start stepping outside of the norms in that academic structure, the school structure, you are made to feel that you are wrong.
Yeah.
Possibly weird. And certainly, it's probably not just being a little bit bolshy in your opinions that makes you weird, but it's one of the things. And yeah, there is that expectation that you have to fit into the boxes. Everyone should be treated the same and react the same and want the same things. And we don't.
So, yeah. Okay, so this is interesting, because obviously I wonder if you've felt previously a little bit like me, that during, perhaps school, university, and so on, it was always about sort of striving, this sort of, I'm not saying I necessarily identified with perfectionism back then, but I definitely identified with this sort of keep striving, pushing, possibly to an extent that was a bit detrimental. So I guess it was lurking there of a fashion. Whereas now I'm in my 40s, I've given my career has sort of gone in a different direction now, but I had to give myself permission to do that and to step away. And I guess I'm now feeling more a level of comfort with this idea of not being perfect, of doing things that, like you used to said, the bit about doing things a bit differently, sort of accepting this is who I am, this is what I love doing, and that's okay. Do you resonate with some of that? Is that a bit similar to your story?
Absolutely. I'm not sure I fully recovered from perfectionism. No, I am sure I haven't fully recovered from perfectionism, but I am so much more aware of it now, and so much better able to step in and sort of take that action of, this is enough. This thing that I have produced, that I have done, the action I've taken, I did my best at that particular moment in time, and that is enough. It's always enough.
Yeah.
And if it's something, a task you repeat or whatever, then you're going to get better over time. Each time it's going to get better. And we don't have to be the same as everybody else, because it's something we've kept coming back to, isn't it? That idea of perfectionism, it makes clones of us. There is the perfect, which is what we should aspire to, apparently. But if we're all aspiring to the same thing, to be the same thing, then we're all becoming the same. And frankly, how fucking dull would that be?
Yeah. The other thing is, of course, people have different ideas of what perfect looks like anyway, don't they? If you think about this idea of the perfect woman, you ask two men what their perfect woman might be, chances are she's going to look different. I'm sure there'll be some commonalities, but chances are they would look different. So again, it's a very elusive, vague concept, I think, when you really start to dig into it. And I suppose our message is about picking up on some of how language has shaped this. So I'm just going to say, you use the word enough there a couple of times. It's funny because enough has the connotation of being almost like the bare minimum, doesn't it? Like, oh, it's enough, or it's there. But actually, well, it can do, I suppose. But I think for us, we're saying actually enough is okay. It doesn't have to be this bare minimum type interpretation. It's the same the fact that imperfect, which is what we're all about, has the im at the beginning, which is like it's like an opposing term, isn't it? Think of like balance and imbalance. It's the least desirable side of the word. Like we want things in balance. Imbalance bad, balance good. So imperfect is like the negative side of
not good.
Perfect. But we want to make the case that it's the other way around, don't we, Kirsty?
Absolutely. Imperfect. And I like, when you see the word play, imperfect is actually I am perfect, as you point out, I'm perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are perfectly ourselves, which is not necessarily an absolute ideal of perfection according to anybody else, according to society's stereotypes. But we are perfectly ourselves. And in embracing our imperfection, I'm putting bunny ears around that, we embrace all that we have to offer instead of worrying about how we're different to other people. We can start focusing on what we have to offer and all that we can be.
I think this is probably the thing that really united us at the start when we both discovered we were coaches. We both felt very strongly about this idea that coaching is not about transforming, and we're going to talk probably about that another time in more detail, but it's not about changing you for something better, like that you're fundamentally flawed somehow and you need improving or changing somehow, especially into something that you're deep down you're not. It's what you already are and all that you are. So when we talk about transformation, we both joked about this, haven't we, about a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. I said this to somebody just yesterday about it not being you're a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. You're already the butterfly, but you're also a bit of the caterpillar as well. You're a bit. It's all of you, isn't it? Yeah. So I don't know if I gave her a very strange image of her being some kind of. But I think she got the point that I was trying to make, and I know it's one that you feel very strongly about as well. It's not about changing, and it's certainly not about you're imperfect now, so let's work on changing you into something that's perfect. That's definitely not what we're about.
No, it's about getting to understand and know who you truly are and embracing that. I keep saying embracing that, verbal tick there, but so that you can then, what you can change is how you choose to respond to the world, how you choose to show up in and experience your life. And that's what makes the difference.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it's really important to acknowledge progress and effort as well as just outcomes. Because I think when we get obsessed with the term like being perfect and perfectionism, we're looking for this perfect end result, end goal, end outcome, perfect, all of that kind of stuff, aren't we? And actually, I know we're both checking our hair at the moment, but it's actually, if you think about it, it's the efforts and the progress and the hard work, they absolutely count. Because also, how else are you ever even going to get better at something? We don't start life as being perfectly good at something, do we? It's something that we learn and develop and go better at. And sometimes we realize that maybe we do just suck at something.
I realized that about many things, and it's quite liberating.
Yeah, I wasn't cut out to be a ballerina. Sad times, but
something else we have in common. Yeah.
Oh, really? Do you know what? It's a shame because apparently I had the right shaped toes for it. I did have the right, because I think if you have toes that are quite the same sort of, it makes it a lot easier for you to balance. But you actually need to have a bit of coordination, which sadly I lacked.
No, the coordination fairy passed me by completely, as I proved when I fell over running again this morning. But moving on. I am very much an imperfect runner, but I can say I am too slow. I am too clumsy. I'm I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm not going to put myself under that scrutiny because I'm never going to be Paula Radcliffe. I'm never going to run a marathon. But the running, I was going to say the running makes me feel good. More accurately, finishing running makes me feel good. The exercise is good for me. I benefit from it. I do actually enjoy the kind of headspace I get when I'm running. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I would lose all that if I aimed for perfect.
Yeah. Much better just to be doing it at all and having some kind of benefit and reward from doing it. And it's funny you should use running as the example there, because for me, I'm always thinking about what is one step forward. If a leap feels too far, too big a jump, I'm like, what is the one step forward? So this, coming back to what we said really, really early on about always looking to strive, I like to add the word strive realistically. Don't put yourself in a position where you're
real.
Yeah, aiming for something that feels unobtainable, like perfectionism, and just think, what is one step closer or one step in the right direction for me?
And I use something similar again when I'm running, but when I'm finding it really tough, a mantra that has helped me is one foot in front of the other. It's all you have to do. Just put one foot in front of the other, and you're doing it.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw a little clip that's been doing the rounds just recently. I think it showed the last person finishing a marathon. I want to say Manchester, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a lady on her own. Clearly she is the last runner and she's just about making it to the line and she bursts into tears, but everyone's there giving her a round of applause because she did it. And I just thought, good for her. She's run it her way, but she's still done it. What an amazing achievement.
Absolutely. And how many people watching that race and applauding her could have done the time that she did, could have done it at all?
Mm.
We tend as a society to perhaps mock those who come in last, those who are the slowest, the least good, without stopping to think that at least they are doing it, whereas the armchair warriors aren't.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit like when you're at a wedding, maybe, and you're the one that's on the dance floor throwing some shapes, some really unconventional ones, and someone sat there watching you, and you might be thinking, oh God, I bet they're really judging me about how bad my moves are. But you're the one actually perhaps having fun. Or maybe they're having fun watching you, I don't know. But do you know what I mean?
They're thinking, I wish I was brave enough to do that.
Yeah, they might be. We often put thoughts into other people's heads, don't we, that aren't necessarily there. But I do think it is. I think that's definitely something that's come as I've got older. I really admire people who are just giving something a go.
Yes.
Because what's the alternative is to not try, to not accept that you might ever fail. And I'm sure we're going to talk about failure at another time as well, because it's another hot topic, isn't it, for us in the coaching space, that it's got lots of negative connotations, but actually it's one of my favorite things to talk about, because accepting it as just something normal and as learning and as progress is a very different view on it. But that'll probably send me down a whole nother tangent, so we'll save that one for another time. Is there anything else you wanted to say about perfectionism, or shall we end with our question of the day?
Let's end with our question, because as coaches, that's what we love to do, isn't it? Ask questions.
Yeah. So we thought we would ask, and we're both also going to answer this ourselves, but we thought, let's ask everyone to focus on what's your favorite imperfection. So Kirsty, would you like to share what yours is?
I've spent quite a lot of time thinking about this, and I get various different answers, but I think what it comes down to is something that I've often been accused of is in failing to take myself seriously or life seriously. And I recognize that can hold me back, especially the not taking myself seriously. When you're trying to run your own business and put yourself out or whatever, not taking yourself seriously can genuinely be a handicap. However, I love it because it keeps me laughing. And there is an awful lot of grim shit going on in the world. And when you can just see the funny side, find something in that find that light in the dark, I think that's what makes all the difference. And so, yeah, my favorite imperfection is not taking myself seriously.
Sounds good to me.
And how about you?
So I have a scar on my right hand. So it's interesting because I feel like it is fading quite a lot. So I have had it since I was about 18 months old, I think. So it's been with me for a good few years now, quite a lot of years. And it's funny because it's quite I see it every day on my hand, but I so accept it now as part of me. So it's almost like a sort of crescent moon shaped burn scar. And I don't know, I'm just strangely fond of it. I find it quite reassuring when I see it there, because it's just part of me that I see is a little bit different and unique, but I kind of like it. Which I know is a bit strange. I know it's a shame. I know my mum really doesn't like it because it reminds her when I was small and unfortunately had a little accident with some hot water. But it's something that I've never had a memory of not having it as well. And I just think I kind of like that slight little imperfection that I have.
I think that's beautiful. I really do.
It's interesting, isn't it? When we realise we can see imperfections in a different light. Like even though I know I did just mention it as an imperfection, but I never look at it and think of it as an imperfection. I just see it as a slight little quirk, something that's me. And that's just a different way to look at imperfection. It's just you, isn't it? It's just a facet of you, not being a clone, not being perfect, but just being you. And I think that's such a healthy way to think about imperfection, not having to put a sort of negative slant on it.
Absolutely. And that, just a final point before we leave it, is where you said that you don't necessarily see it as an imperfection. It's that awareness of the expectations being placed on us, demands being made by society, by the people around us, by schools, by employers, by whatever, as to how we should be. And in our own minds, we know that is not necessarily right. That's not necessarily how we have to be, the right thing for us. So when we go inwards, we find that, and we can recognize that we may not be like those stereotypes, those expectations, but we are still perfectly us in all our imperfection.
I think that's a beautiful way to end. So I hope everyone else manages to find an imperfection that they love about themselves.
And many imperfections.
Oh, many, yeah. Let's have lots of them.
What's your favourite? Yes.
Yeah. Try and pick a favourite. Well, thank you so much for chatting all things perfectionism and imperfectionism today. And we will be back soon for another episode. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect.
Please visit the show notes for details on how to contact us and for any resources we may have on the topic discussed.
Until next time, keep being imperfectly you. No one does it better.